The Valorian Empire had conquered 600 star systems. They had crushed 47 intelligent species under their heel. Their warships numbered in the millions, and their soldiers were trained from birth to kill without mercy. For 10,000 years, they spread across the galaxy like a disease, taking whatever they wanted and destroying anyone who refused to kneel. When their scouts first detected Earth, they laughed. The planet was small. The species living there had only recently discovered space travel. Their ships were primitive. Their weapons were weak. Their population was divided into hundreds of nations that constantly fought each other. The Valorians had seen this pattern before. A young species still learning to walk among the stars, completely unaware of the dangers waiting in the dark. High Commander Zorth studied the reports from his flagship. He was an old warrior with scars covering most of his gray skin. He had personally overseen the conquest of 12 worlds. He knew exactly how this would go. First, they would send a diplomatic vessel. The diplomats would demand surrender. The primitive species would either submit immediately or try to negotiate. Either way, the result was the same. The Valorians would take control of the planet, strip it of resources, and enslave the population. It was a process as old as the Empire itself. Zorth ordered a single diplomatic cruiser to approach Earth. The ship carried 50 diplomats, 200 soldiers, and enough firepower to destroy a small moon. It was more than enough for a planet of primitives. The cruiser entered Earth's solar system and began broadcasting the standard message of surrender. They sent it in every language they had recorded from intercepted Earth transmissions. The message was simple and direct. Surrender immediately. Hand over all resources and weapons. Accept Valorian rule. Resistance would result in complete annihilation. They expected fear. They expected panic. They expected desperate attempts at communication, begging for mercy, or trying to negotiate better terms. What they received was silence. For 3 days, the diplomatic cruiser waited. No response came from Earth. No ships approached them. No communication channels opened. The planet below continued its normal activities as if the Valorians did not exist. The diplomats were confused. This had never happened before. Every species they encountered reacted to the message. Some screamed in terror. Some tried to fight immediately. Some fell to their knees and worshipped the Valorians as gods. But none had ever simply ignored them. Captain Veleth of the diplomatic cruiser sent an urgent message back to High Commander Zorth. Something was wrong. The humans were not behaving like any species they had encountered before. Perhaps they had not understood the message. Perhaps their communication technology was too primitive to respond. Perhaps they were simply too stupid to recognize the threat. Zorth was annoyed. He had better things to do than deal with a backwater planet that did not know its place in the universe. He ordered Veleth to approach Earth directly and repeat the message from orbit. If the humans still did not respond, he had permission to destroy one of their smaller cities as a demonstration of power. The diplomatic cruiser moved closer to Earth. It entered orbit and positioned itself above the planet's largest ocean. Once again, they broadcast the surrender demand. Once again, they received nothing but silence. Veleth was getting nervous. His sensors showed unusual activity on the planet's surface. Military installations were coming online. Satellites were repositioning. There was a lot of movement, but none of it was directed toward communication. He decided to proceed with the demonstration. He selected a small coastal city and prepared to fire. It would be a quick strike, enough to kill a few million humans and show them what the Valorians were capable of. His weapons officer targeted the city. The firing sequence began. And then everything went dark. For exactly 4 seconds, every system on the diplomatic cruiser shut down completely. When power returned, Veleth found himself staring at his tactical display in complete disbelief. There were ships everywhere. They had appeared from nowhere. One moment, Earth orbit was empty, except for a few primitive satellites. The next moment, it was filled with warships. Velith counted them frantically. 100, 300, 500, 700. The numbers kept climbing until his computer simply displayed a single terrifying figure. 1,147 warships. They were not the primitive vessels the scouts had reported. These ships were massive. Their designs were unlike anything in the Valorian database. Dark hulls covered in strange symbols, weapon systems that his sensors could not even identify, shields that burned with an eerie blue light. The diplomatic cruiser was completely surrounded. Velith tried to send a distress signal to High Commander Zorath, but all communications were blocked. He tried to activate his weapons, but they would not respond. He tried to move his ship, but the engines were dead. A single human vessel approached. It was smaller than the others, but somehow more frightening. Its hull was black as space itself, and its surface seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. For the first time, a communication channel opened. A human appeared on Velith's screen. It was a female with cold eyes and a face that showed no emotion whatsoever. She wore a uniform covered in medals and symbols of rank. When she spoke, her voice was calm and quiet, almost gentle. She said only 7 words. "You should not have come here." The channel closed. The black ship moved away. What happened next took less than 30 seconds. Every warship in Earth's fleet fired simultaneously. The diplomatic cruiser's shields lasted exactly 2 seconds before collapsing. The hull was torn apart by weapons that burned hotter than stars. The ship did not explode so much as simply cease to exist. There were no survivors. High Commander Zorath received the news 3 days later. He stared at the report for a long time, trying to understand what had happened. His diplomatic cruiser had been destroyed by a species that should not have been capable of interplanetary travel. Somehow, Earth had assembled a fleet of warships more advanced than anything the Valorians possessed. His advisors suggested caution. Perhaps they should send a larger fleet to investigate. Perhaps they should try to communicate with the humans and learn where they had acquired such technology. Zorath dismissed their suggestions. The Valorians had not conquered 600 star systems by being cautious. They had done it through overwhelming force. If the humans wanted a war, he would give them a war they would never forget. He assembled a battle fleet of 5,000 warships. It was the largest fleet deployed in a century. 50 million soldiers. Enough firepower to crack a planet in half. He personally led the fleet toward Earth, eager to avenge the destruction of his diplomatic cruiser. The journey took 2 weeks. During that time, Zorath studied everything the Empire knew about humans. The information was disturbing. Unlike other species, humans had spent their entire history at war with each other. They had developed weapons of mass destruction before they had developed space travel. They had nearly wiped themselves out multiple times. They were violent, unpredictable, and completely obsessed with combat. His advisors suggested that this was a good thing. A species constantly at war with itself would be weakened, divided, and easy to conquer. Zorath was not so sure. A species that survived constant warfare might also be stronger than anyone expected. When the Valorian fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system, Zorath ordered a full sensor scan. What he found made his blood run cold. The human fleet had grown. Instead of 1,000 ships, there were now 10,000. They were positioned throughout the solar system, forming defensive lines around every planet and moon. More ships were being built in massive orbital shipyards that surrounded Earth like a crown of steel and fire. And they were waiting. Zorath understood immediately. The humans had known the Valorians would return. They had been preparing for this moment since the destruction of a diplomatic cruiser. Perhaps they had been preparing for much longer than that. For the first time in his long career, Zorath felt something he had not experienced since childhood: fear. He tried to communicate with the human fleet. He offered negotiations. He offered peace. He even offered to withdraw entirely and leave Earth alone forever. The humans did not respond. They did not send diplomats. They did not make demands. They did not speak at all. Instead, they simply attacked. The battle lasted 6 hours. By the end, every single Valorian warship had been destroyed. 50 million soldiers died without ever understanding what had happened. High Commander Zorath watched his fleet burn from the bridge of his flagship before a human missile struck his vessel directly. His last thought was a question he would never be able to answer. How had they known? The truth was simple. Earth had been watching the stars for a very long time. Humans had detected the Valorian Empire centuries before the Valorians detected them. They had studied their enemies carefully. They had learned their tactics, their weaknesses, and their patterns. And they had prepared. The primitive ships the scouts had observed were decoys. The divided nations were a carefully maintained illusion. The truth was that humanity had been united for 300 years, working in secret to build a fleet capable of defending their world against any threat. When the Valorians sent their diplomatic cruiser, humanity recognized the pattern immediately. They had seen the Empire do the same thing to dozens of other species. Arrive with a small force, demand surrender, destroy anyone who refused. The leaders of Earth decided there would be no meetings. There would be no negotiations. There would be no words at all. There would only be war. In the years that followed, Earth did not wait for the Valorians to send another fleet. Instead, humanity went on the offensive. Their warships spread across the galaxy like a storm of fire and steel. They liberated every world the Valorians had conquered. They freed every species the Empire had enslaved. The Valorian homeworld fell in the 3rd year of the war. The Empire, that had ruled 600 star systems for 10,000 years, was destroyed completely. When it was over, the surviving alien species asked humanity a simple question. Why had they fought so hard? Why had they risked everything to destroy the Valorians? The human answer was equally simple, because no one else could. The galaxy had been waiting for a savior. They had prayed for someone to stand against the darkness. And in their darkest hour, humanity had answered. Not with words, not with diplomacy, with 1,000 warships in orbit and the courage to use them.